Business is about many things. One of the many things it is about is finding opportunities. And when I say finding opportunities, I don't necessarily mean just opportunities to make money. I mean it in the sense of finding opportunities to cater to people's needs, finding opportunities to cater to people's desires, and finding opportunities to help people. A person with a business mindset always looks for a fresh start. Even at the end of all things, a business-minded person will look for the beginning of something bigger. And nothing represents new opportunities and fresh starts better than the rising morning sun. That's why, as far as we are concerned, whatever time it is, it's always morning. Good morning, dearest student leaders of the Xavier University School of Business and Management Student Council. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Carlo Ang. I am many things, and I've done many things for many people, but for now, I'll just tell you the parts of me that concern this talk. I graduated from Xavier University High School, batch 2002. I was an officer of the High School Student Council back when it was called the Student Council. I think it has a different name now. In college at Xavier University, I was involved with quite a few organizations. Since I was a business management student, of course, I was involved with what used to be called the Commerce Student Council. Back when the college was still called the College of Commerce, instead of the School of Business and Management that it's called now. Later, moved on over to the Central Student Government to serve with both the Department of Information and the Department of Academics. I've also served with the city government and the national government. Not necessarily as an elected official, but as a volunteer and consultant for various youth-related projects. Back during my time was a really fun time to be a student leader. Now that I think about it, how did I do all of what I did and still manage to graduate? Right now, I am the founding department head of the Accountancy, Business and Management strand of Corpus Christi School. So, yeah, if there are student leaders among you who are graduates of Corpus Christi School, Senior High School, Accountancy, Business and Management, yeah, they're our products. I'd like to take this moment to apologize to all of you kung bakit naging ganyan yung mga ABM namin. We did our best talaga. We don't know bakit ganyan sila talaga. So sorry po. We did our best, we swear. Just kidding. We're very, very proud of them. We love them very much. Among other things I did and do here, I used to be our school's Central Student Government Moderator, but right now, I function as the de facto guardian angel of all student organizations in Corpus Christi School, especially the Central Student Government. So, whenever there's something they want to do and they need administrative support, it's me they call. From being a student to being a teacher, I've always been supportive of student organizations and student servant leadership. And now that I am where I am now, I have a unique perspective born out of my experiences as a student leader in the past and as a teacher of student leaders in the present. Student engagement was the topic asked of me, and let me tell you, the topic of student engagement has been around for a long time. Even back then, back like almost 2 decades ago, the issue of student engagement, or rather the seeming lack of student engagement, has always been around. Student apathy has always been an issue and a problem, so that's what we're going to talk about. Student engagement in a council setting can be broadly defined as the emotional connection between a student and his student government. A highly engaged student will buy into what his student government is doing. He will promote it and he will demonstrate loyalty towards it. Just to clarify, loyalty to a student government is loyalty to the idea of the existence of a government or leadership. It's not necessarily the loyalty or belief in the present leader or the present ruling political party, but it's the very broad, complex idea of loyalty to a government or to the idea of leadership. To give you an example, a person can be completely and utterly loyal to the Philippine government, but be completely and utterly hateful and spiteful of the current administration. It's very possible for you to actually love the idea of democracy, to love the idea of freedom and the bicameral system, and the checks and balances of the 3 branches of government. And yet, because of this love for the government, you hate the current president running the government because you feel like he or she is not running it properly. It's kind of like loving a friend so much but hating his girlfriend. Your love for your friend pushes you to hate his girlfriend because you feel like his girlfriend is not treating him the way he should be treated. Why am I telling it to you like this? I'm telling you this because you should, in fact, get your constituents, the SBM students, engaged in 2 ways. You want them to be engaged both to your current administration and to your current government. But you also want them to be engaged to the very idea and the very existence of student governance. When the SBM students are engaged to the SBM Student Council but they are not engaged to your administration, then they will love the idea of having a student government and believe in its underlying principles and ideas. But they will be hurtful and spiteful and unsupportive towards your administration. When the SBM students are engaged in your administration but not the SBM Student Council, they will support your activities only because it's you. They will participate in your events only because it's you, but once you're gone, they won't care. They only buy into you, not because they believe that student governance, stewardship, and self-leadership is important, but only because, well, it's you. So again, you want them to be engaged both to your current administration and your current government, but you also want them to be engaged to the very idea and the very existence of government. In the realm of education, one name that I can easily think of when thinking of engagement is Dr. Philip Schlechte, founder of the Schlechte Center for Leadership in School Reform. He created the levels of engagement to describe the engagement of a student to his educational experiences by basing it on a student's attention and commitment. Strangely enough, Schlechte's levels of engagement is actually used by business leaders to describe the levels of engagement of a customer towards a particular brand, and is also used by political analysts to describe the levels of engagement of a person towards his own government. So, we're going to discuss your SBM students' engagement based on Schlechte's levels of engagement. So, this is what it looks like. On one side, you have different levels of attention, and on the other side, you have different levels of commitment. The different levels of engagement are based on how much attention and commitment a student may have towards the SBM Student Council. When a student has diverted attention and zero commitment, we call that rebellion. This is when your student is hateful, spiteful, disruptive, and destructive. This can usually happen when a student has a really negative experience towards a particular member of the student council, or was wronged by the student council in some way, or if he feels like there was something that the student council failed to do. They will actually actively attend activities simply to cause trouble. And yeah, that's pretty bad. When a student has no attention and no commitment, we call that retreatism. While this student is not disruptive or destructive, they're just not there and they just don't care. There are many reasons for this. Probably they're just concerned with other things, or maybe they just don't see a reason to care much for their student government. When a student has low attention and low commitment, we call that ritual compliance. These students will simply do the bare minimum of complying with whatever it is the student council wants, just to avoid a possible conflict, just to have the experience of being there, or be with friends, or because there's just nothing better to do. They're always there during your activities, but they're just there. When a student has high attention but low commitment, we call that strategic compliance. These students seem to be playing the game of government. They seem to be going through the motions. They look actively engaged, but they're only actually doing it because there are extrinsic rewards for doing so. Examples would be positive reinforcement, like plus points from teachers, freebies, or establishment of a social network, additional entries for their resume after graduation, and other such things. They're there, they look active, but not because of the reasons you really want them to be active. And officers of the School of Business and Management Student Council, I will tell you straight to the face. I know that some of you know, deep inside, that some of you are officers, even elected officers, simply for strategic compliance. But when a student has high attention and high commitment, that is full engagement. This is when a student is actively participating in the activities and actively believe in the ideas of student governance, not because there are external rewards for doing so, but because they believe that they should, and because they know it is right for them to do so. The rewards are internal and intrinsic. There are a few things that you have to learn regarding these levels of engagement. First, you have to learn that your SBM students, when they start out in college, they will have a starting point in the levels of engagement based on their initial experiences from back in high school. For example, if a student has always had a problem with authority in high school and has always hated the idea of student leaders, then stepping into college, he will be in the rebellion level. Or if a student was always the perfect student back in high school for a purely extrinsic reason and has always chased student government positions in high school for medals and awards, then stepping into college, he will start out in the strategic compliance position. But even if they start somewhere, they don't always stay there. Based on their changing life experiences, their maturity as a person, their development of who they are and what they want to be, a student can rise or fall in the levels of engagement. Sometimes it can be directly because of the activities of the SBMSC. Sometimes it can be indirect. Sometimes it just happens. For example, a student in ritual compliance who is about to graduate suddenly realizes that he needs to attend SBMSC activities because his resume is so blank, so he needs to put leadership experiences in there, will rise to strategic compliance all on his own. Or, a fully engaged student can suddenly fall into hard times. His parents break up, he has to watch over his siblings, he suddenly needs to care for their family business. He can suddenly fall to retreatism all on his own. So why is it that I've chosen to discuss the levels of engagement like this? As a teacher for more than a decade now, I've taught many levels, hierarchies, and tier lists. And the reason I teach them all is the same. In any list of levels, in any hierarchy, in any tier list, each level is different from the other. Understanding the similarities and differences between the levels gives you a clue as to how to deal with them. For example, understanding the levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs gives you an insight into when and how people need certain things. Or, understanding Erik Erikson's stages of human development gives you an insight on how people grow and what they need for each stage of growth. Understanding Schlechty's levels of engagement also gives you an insight as to what to do during different stages of the levels of development. Now, I'm just going to very quickly give examples of what you can do, but please note that the things I'm about to say are not hard and fast rules, they're just suggestions. For someone in the rebellion stage to go to the retreatism stage, try to convince or show him that there is no reason to hate the government and that there is no advantage or profit in spreading hate. Also, this is much easier to do if the person in the rebellion stage finds that there's nobody around him to support his rebellion because everyone around him is at the retreatism stage or higher. For someone in the retreatism stage to move to the ritual compliance stage, you may at least make sure that his retreatism is by choice. What do I mean by this? Sometimes, students are in the retreatism stage because they do not know enough about the activity to ever give it any attention or commitment. In this case, informing them about your activities, your goals, and your objectives may be the key to at least getting them to comply. So, okay, they're complying, they're attending, but they're just there ritually. They're there, but they're only just there. For someone in the ritual compliance stage to move to the strategic compliance stage, you may want to add some additional incentives for further participation, such as academic grade incentives, material rewards, and other such benefits. Different tier levels of different courses have very different things that push and excite them, so the gathering of information through surveys may help in managing this. And lastly, for someone to move from strategic compliance to full engagement, proper communication is key. For them to fully commit not only to attending the activities and participating in the SBMSC's events, they must fully buy into the goals and objectives not only of each activity, but of the council itself and of the current administration. Additionally, to make these goals and objectives believable, each officer of the student council must embody these goals and objectives and act consistently with the values set by the organization. So, since we're talking about student engagement, it's then great to answer the question, what exactly does full student engagement bring us? To put it bluntly, student engagement brings us two important things. For the same amount of effort and resources, we gain higher profits and lower costs. How does student engagement raise profits? Please note that profit in this case is not monetary in nature. I'm talking about profit in the sense of the definition having maximum gains from minimum losses. Gains or profit in this case may mean life lessons, memorable experiences, a good time with friends, a chance to get to know the student council, and other such good things that can come from an SBM student council activity. A fully engaged person will undoubtedly gain more from an activity compared to someone who is merely partially engaged or not engaged at all. Well, for starters, a fully engaged person will attend the activity, he will be more participative, more insightful, more disciplined, and more attentive. A fully engaged person will leave the activity bringing with him far more compared to someone who is merely partially engaged. And naturally, fully engaged constituents bring so much profit to the SBMSC in a non-monetary sense. That's because I know a lot of you can relate to this. It's just much more fulfilling deep inside to do an activity and then having it be successful with everyone actively participating and everyone enjoying themselves, and then the feedback from social media is nice. it just feels nice all around. It becomes all the more motivating to do the next activity. So how does student engagement lower costs? Please note that costs in this case is not always monetary in nature. I'm talking about loss and costs in the sense of the definition maximum gains from minimum losses. Losses or costs in this case may mean sacrifices, time, effort, and other such monetary and non-monetary expenses that you have to incur when you create an SBM Student Council activity. A fully engaged person will undoubtedly allow you to incur fewer costs from an activity compared to someone who is merely partially engaged or not engaged at all. To give an example, a person who is already fully engaged doesn't need to be convinced to come to an activity. He just will be there. He doesn't need that many monetary or non-monetary incentives because he fully understands why these activities are important even without incentives. You don't need to advertise to them. They will actively seek information all on their own. And naturally, fully engaged constituents bring much fewer costs to the SBMSC in a non-monetary sense. That's because I know a lot of you can relate to this. When an activity just clicks and people like an activity and are fully engaged in them, it's much easier to move people around. It takes less effort to do so. It takes fewer people to facilitate. So again, student engagement brings us two important things. For the same amount of effort and resources, we gain higher profits and lower costs. And again, profits and costs in this case are meant in both monetary and non-monetary ways. So, how exactly do you improve student engagement as a whole? There are so many ways to do this, but I guess for the sake of this talk, I'm going to give you just 4 overall tips on how to do this. Tip number 1, build trust. I want to say that student engagement is not a one-off. Getting student engagement is not a one-time big-time event wherein you do a massive promotional campaign and then boom, students are engaged. No, I know that you know that that's not how that works. The foundations of student engagement is built on a lot of things such as history and trust. Naturally, your constituents are not faceless NPCs in a video game or background characters in a story. They're people with motivations and dreams and memories. They're people that you have to build a good working relationship with. But what's difficult about that is the fact that this relationship you have with your constituents is not even something you can fully build and nurture in just one school year. It spans years. If you have a good relationship with the student now, that's partly because of you and partly because the administrations before yours have built that relationship too. Conversely, if you have a bad relationship with them now, that's partly because of you and partly because the administrations before yours have wrecked that relationship too. So, building trust with your constituents is the same as building trust with any person. Communicate well, be open, be honest, and be consistent. Tip number 2, make sure your activities or programs have something in mind for people of various levels of engagement. We already talked about the levels of engagement a while ago, and we mentioned that each person is currently on a different level of engagement. The best way to help all of them is to make sure that your activity has something for each level of engagement. For example, you have an activity, let's say it's a trivia night type of activity wherein people can form groups to try to one-up each other in a battle of trivia wits. So, how can we cater to the various levels of engagement? Well, for the fully engaged, you can get them on board by first announcing that not only do you need participants, you're also going to need staff to facilitate the activity. Those who are fully engaged would definitely enjoy being part of the working committee of the event. Those who are strategically compliant would likely want to join, amp up their desire to join by providing enticing prizes. The ritually compliant would want to watch. Provide a live stream for them to be able to watch the activity as an audience member, not necessarily as a participant. And for the retreatists, at least give them the choice to watch later by recording the live stream and posting the video as content on demand. There's not much of a chance that they're going to watch it, but it's at least there if they want it. Tip number 3. You're never going to get them all, so don't stress yourselves out too much. Try to get as many of your constituents engaged, but also don't force it so much. It's going to be destructive both for you and for your constituents. Remember, their college life is not about you. They went to school to study, to learn, to graduate. Even if you're an important part of their college life, you're not the most important part of their college life. Back when I was a student leader, we were just gathered around, idly chatting, talking about our activities and the different day-to-day struggles of councils and student leaders until one of us said, Minsan nakakapagod maging student leader kasi feeling mo, yung mga students, walang pakialam. Of course, being fellow student leaders, we all agreed with him. But this hit me very, very differently when I was more mature and when I had a very different point of view. I was a teacher, assisting the Central Student Government, and as I was talking to our Central Student Government President, she told me the same words I heard years ago. She said, "Sir, nakakapagod maging student leader kasi feeling ko, yung mga students, walang pakialam." You know, when I heard that, I was dumbstruck. I was like speechless for a few moments, not because I disagreed with her, but because I suddenly realized that I had a very different opinion on the matter now compared to all those years ago. So I will tell all of you the same piece of wisdom I told the Central Student Government President, and the same piece of wisdom I should have told myself back when I was a student leader. There is no such thing as an apathetic student. There is no such thing as a student na walang pakialam. May pakialam yan. It just so happens that yung pakialam niya is different sa pakialam mo. A lot of our students are dealing with things that are far above our own heads. How exactly can you expect a student to join a General Assembly if he's working for his own tuition? Or if he's fighting crippling depression? Or if he's struggling with problems in a relationship that is important to him that he wants to save? Or if he's about to lose his scholarship because he might fail his studies. And if they don't attend your General Assembly, or if they don't cheer you during intramurals, would you be so angry at them? Would you really think na wala silang pakialam? In your eyes, as student leaders, wala silang pakialam on school and student issues. But in their eyes, maybe kayo, ang mga School of Business and Management Student Council officers and members, ang walang pakialam sa mga pinaglalaban nila at mga importante sa kanila. Are they correct? So again, you're never going to get them all. Try to get as many of your constituents engaged, but also, don't force it so much because there is no such thing as an apathetic student. There is no such thing as a student that doesn't care. They just care about different things. And lastly, tip number 4. Remember that engagement is a two-way street. Sure, we're talking about the engagement of students towards the SBMSC, but ask yourself this and answer yourself honestly. From your constituents' point of view, how engaged is the SBMSC towards them and the things that truly matter to them? Do you know your constituents? Do you know the things that matter to them? Their fears, their hopes, their dreams, things that make them happy, things that make them angry, things that fuel their passions? So, how engaged are you towards the students? Are you rebellious towards them? Are you just retreatists towards their concerns? Are you just ritually compliant? Are you pretending to be engaged but are just strategically compliant? Or are you fully engaged? Answering these questions regarding your level of engagement towards the students just might be equally as important as talking about the students' levels of engagement towards you. Think about it. So, that wraps up my talk on student engagement. If you reached this far without falling asleep, then great. I really hope you learned something for this day. I'd like to thank one of my beloved alumni, J.M. Boloron, for inviting me to share this with all of you. I wish you all a fruitful school year. Once again, I am Carlo Ang, XU-HS Student Council, XU Commerce Student Council, XU Central Student Government, Corpus Christi School Accountancy, Business and Management. Thank you very much for watching.